You're listening to Brandon Sports Talk, interviewing professional athletes and Paralympians and Olympians. And now for your professional athlete interview and your host, Brandon P. Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege of interviewing the Let's Talk Women in Basketball's podcast, Jennifer Portte. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started with the podcast and covering women's basketball?
Yes. So I realized, well, first growing up, I wanted to play WNBA. That's been my ultimate dream. I wanted to be a WNBA player. Well, God had other plans for me. So WNBA player did not happen. So I was like, okay, if I'm not going to play basketball, then I wanted to work around the sport. So when I went to college, I decided to major in sport management because I knew I wanted to one day work in professional sports. And so I majored in sport management. I spent several years working with the Miami Heat. And then the pandemic happened where we were home for a long time. So I was like, what should I do during this pandemic? So first thing came to mind was a podcast. So one of my friends, he told me, he was like, well, you know so much about sports. Why don't you start your own sports show? So I said, okay, well, if I start a sports show, it's definitely going to be on women's basketball because women's basketball don't get much coverage. When you turn to ESPN, they spend all day talking about the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, and they spend about, I want to say, a good 2 minutes on women's basketball and then go hop into another story. So I was like, you know what, if I do it, it's going to be women's basketball so that people could come on my show and get like updates and not only get updates about the team, but also learn about the player's story. And that's what I wanted to highlight. I wanted to highlight their journey, how they got to where they are, because we want the young girls to find out how did these athletes get to where they are. And ESPN is not showing that right now. So I wanted to create a podcast so that people can come on my show and hear their stories.
After coming up with the sport of women's basketball, how did you come up with the name Let's Talk Women's in Basketball?
So it was originally called Let's Talk WNBA, but unfortunately I had to change it because you're not allowed to use WNBA in your podcast because their name is already a trademark. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna name it Let's Talk Women in Basketball because I know that I'll be talking about women in basketball. So I thought it would be an attractive name and it would draw like attention. So I decided, okay, Let's Talk Women in Basketball it is.
What are some of the things that you talk about in your podcast, Women's in Basketball?
So I mostly highlight the player's journey, from their childhood, their dreams growing up, and how did they overcome adversity. I also highlight some player stats. I highlight game highlights. What happened during the game, after the game. If there was a interesting thing that a player said in a post game interview, then I highlight that. So I mostly give like updated news and updates on women's basketball.
While covering, of course, the WNBA, do you also cover college women's basketball and
Yeah.
overseas women's basketball?
Well, I haven't covered overseas yet. That's in the process, but I have covered college basketball. And when I cover college basketball, I love to highlight I love to highlight their game stats as well.
What is that experience like getting to cover the college side of women's basketball and seeing those players go on into the WNBA?
It has been very rewarding, highlighting those college players because to me, the college players they work extremely hard. I think they work more harder sometimes than the WNBA player because they're trying to get to the WNBA. So it's been a rewarding experience, highlighting them and to see them move on to the WNBA, it's rewarding.
Who are some of the notable guests that have come on your show?
I had several. I recently had Tamika Dixon on the show. She's a two-time champion for the WNBA, a former WNBA player, Tamika Dixon. Um, I also had Ruthie Bridges. I had Ruthie Bolton. Ruthie Bolton is an Olympian. I've had I highlighted Brittany Griner at one point. You know, with several notable players that have been on the show. Asia Wilson. I did some interviews with her, and yeah, pretty much.
As a podcaster and a member of the media, how do you get the access to media coverage and covering women's basketball?
So I usually just reach out to the team's PR department, to find out if I could be on their media list, and that's how I get coverage.
What is that experience like getting to be a part of their media list and covering the WNBA like teams like the New York Liberty?
It has been a dream come true because, like I mentioned before, I always dreamed of being around the WNBA, whether it be on the court or behind the scenes. So it's just been a dream come true, and just rewarding.
For you as a member of the media, what has it been like getting to hear these players and coaches after post game interviews?
Oh, it's been amazing. Like hearing these players' story and getting the opportunity to interview them, it's been an amazing experience, and I really enjoy just highlighting their journey. It's been an amazing experience, and it's no other way to describe. It's no words that could describe the feeling that I get whenever I get the opportunity to interview those players.
Who are some of your dream interviews in the WNBA that you would love to interview?
I would love to interview Lisa Leslie. She's one of them. I grew up watching Lisa Leslie. I was a huge fan of Lisa Leslie since I was a kid. So to get the opportunity to interview her would be a dream come true. I also would like to interview players like Cynthia Cooper, Cheryl Swoops, um, the pioneers of the WNBA. I would love to get the opportunity to interview those players. Tina Thompson. Um, I would love to interview, well, if I say current players, I would love to interview a current player that I haven't gotten the opportunity to interview yet, that I would love to interview would be, hmm, I can't really think of one that I haven't got the opportunity to interview yet. But I think I got the opportunity to interview most of them, but I can't think of one I haven't.
What is it like getting to interview these current WNBA players that are playing, like Sabrina Ionescu with the New York Liberty?
It's been a great opportunity to interview those players. Especially I get the opportunity to ask them questions and get the opportunity to highlight their journey. So it's been an awesome experience.
Who would be in your top 5 players of all time?
Top five players of all time definitely would be Lisa Leslie. It would be Cynthia Cooper, um, Tina Thompson, Delisha Milton Jones. She definitely got to be on my top five. She's got the best defense in the world. And my fifth one would be all time. Who would be my fifth one? I would say I'll go with Asia Wilson because she's gonna get there. Asia Wilson.
Of course, who would be on your Mount Rushmore of WNBA players?
Say it again.
Your Mount Rushmore of WNBA players.
My Mount Ward
Rushmore.
Rushmore.
Hmm.
That's a tough question. Um, I'm not sure.
Who would be in your top 5 of current WNBA players that are playing now?
Current WNBA players that are playing now: Brittany Griner, Sabrina Ionescu, Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, and Chelsea Gray.
What was that experience like for you getting to interview the commissioner of the WNBA?
It was an awesome experience getting the opportunity to interview her because she gave me insights and things that she's doing to promote the WNBA better. So just to hear her insight and to get the opportunity to interview her was a great experience.
Of course, for you, what is that like balancing being a fan of the WNBA, but also getting to report in the WNBA?
So I try not to be biased when it comes to being a fan and reporting. I'm a huge Los Angeles Sparks fan, so I try not to be biased. If my team isn't doing so great, I'm gonna stick with the facts. So balancing it out, I'm sticking with the facts and making sure that the information that I'm providing is based off accuracy and not bias.
For you, what was that experience like going to the WNBA All Stars and getting to cover that?
It was an awesome experience. It was a dream come true. I always dreamed of one day playing for the WNBA All-Star game, but to just get the opportunity to cover the WNBA is even better. So that was just God letting me know that you didn't get the opportunity to play in the WNBA, but you're here. So it was just an amazing opportunity, getting to highlight those players and their journeys and to see them, accomplish their dream and also get the opportunity to just find out their backstory, like how did they get that far, and to highlight that, it was just an amazing experience.
What is that one interview that has made you into the person that you are today?
Um, I would say that one interview that made me into the person I am today is the one I did with Tamara James. So Tamara James was the first WNBA player, Tamara James. I'll make sure I pronounce her name correctly. Tamara James. She was the first WNBA player that gave me the opportunity to interview her. And when I got that yes from her, it just made me realize that, wow, she like it just opened so many doors, and I really appreciate her to this day to just give me that yes, because she was the first player to come on my show, and for her to be the first player to come on my show and getting that, I was nervous. It was my first time ever interviewing someone of that caliber, so to get that opportunity, it was just an open door for everything else and let me know that, wow, you can do this.
What would you tell your younger self now looking back on your career this far?
I would tell my younger self to, keep going, don't give up. Don't allow the naysayers to distract you from your dreams and your goal. Just keep going because eventually there's light at the end of the tunnel.
What have been some of the things that you've learned throughout your career of covering the WNBA?
Some of the things that I've learned while covering the WNBA, I learned that, hmm, so I learned a lot. I've learned that in this industry, is very competitive. So you have to stay up to date on what is happening in women's basketball. If not, you'll be left behind. So you have to constantly read up on these players and their stories and their stats. You want to always stay up to date. I also learned that I have to sharpen my communication skills because in this industry, you have to have great communication skills if you want to continue.
How has it been like obviously getting to interview those former players and hearing their stories and comparing it to where the WNBA is now?
So hearing the former player story and comparing it to where it is now, the former players, they enlightened me on the fact that the game has gotten a bit more competitive compared to when they played. You know, the viewership definitely went up. You know, so I also learned that the former players, they didn't get opportunities to get like NIL deals and things like that. But the new players, they get those opportunities. So, and I also learned that the WNBA is really growing. Like if you watch the game back in 1997, the game wasn't as big as it is now. So the WNBA is definitely growing.
Who would be one of your dream interviews to interview?
Uh, just women's basketball or any or
Women's
NBA
basketball.
or just women's basketball. Lisa Leslie.
What are some of your future plans in your podcast moving forward?
Just to grow in numbers, you know, get more viewership.
What advice would you give those females out there that are looking to get started into the podcast industry and covering women's sports?
And advice that I would give female who are trying to cover female sports, I would just tell them to, you know, learn the player's journey, you know, learn their story, and also stay up to date on the players' stats and information about the players. And also, if you're looking to get a podcast, make sure you have like great sound and great equipment to keep your podcast up and running.
What advice would you give those sports reporters out there that are looking to get started and interviewing a WNBA player or a WNBA coach?
And advice that I'll give a sports reporter would be to just don't give up. You know, in this industry, you're gonna face a lot of no's, but just keep going because eventually you'll become that reporter that you're trying to be. Also, you want to stay up to date on information when it comes to sports so that you can report the current information. So just stay up to date.
What advice would you give those people out there that are looking to start their own sports podcast covering women's basketball?
Anyone that's looking to start their own sports podcast, I would say grab the equipment now, get a good camera, get a great speaker, sign up for Adobe Premiere Pro, sign up for Adobe Audition so that you'll have good quality sound so that your podcast could be professional, and just practice, practice, practice.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find your podcast at on social media and podcast platforms?
You can find us on Instagram at Let's Talk Women in Basketball. Also on Spotify, Let's Talk Women in Basketball, and YouTube, Let's Talk Women in Basketball.
Thank you again, Jennifer Portte, for your interview and best of luck in your future with Let's Talk Women's in Basketball.
Thank you for having me.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Jennifer, for your interview and best of luck in your future.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.